Brenda Sandilands, aged 4, rubbed superglue on her 3-year-old brother's bottom yesterday. "I thought it was cream," she said. When Craig sat on his bike, he found he was stuck and couldn't move. The children's mother, Mrs. Sandra Sandilands, said, "It happened when I was in the kitchen. I was cooking when Brenda came in and said that Craig was stuck to his bike. She told me she had put cream on Craig's bottom and on the saddle of the bike. Craig wasn't able to move at all, so I had to phone for an ambulance. The ambulance took over an hour to arrive. When it finally did come, the ambulance men unscrewed the saddle from the rest of the bike and took Craig, still stuck to the saddle, to hospital. But he was lucky. It could have been much more serious."
At 6 o'clock yesterday evening, the River Thames burst its bank and flooded a wide area. By 9 o'clock the floods had reached the town of Dorchester. The main street was soon under 3 feet of water. Fire engines arrived quickly to pump away the water, but heavy rain made their job very difficult. Mrs. Rose Willow, a lady nearly 80 years old, and living alone in her cottage, was trapped upstairs for 3 hours. Finally, firemen were able to rescue her with ladders and a small boat. "My cat, Tibbles, stayed with me all the time," said Mrs. Willow. "She helped me a lot. She sat with me, so I didn't feel afraid. The rain has finally stopped, the river level is falling and the weather forecast is good, but the floods have done a great deal of damage. Luckily, nobody was drowned or injured," Chief Fire Officer Hawkins told reporters, "but it will take a long time to clear up the mess."
Three people jumped out of a car on a busy Oxford road after a fire started under the bonnet this morning. They were just able to rescue their possessions before the car burst into flames. Mr. Peter Collins, 25, of Way Road, Bearnsfield, was driving his Avenger estate car home from work with 2 friends when he noticed smoke coming into the car. He stopped, but was unable to open the bonnet. He poured a bottle of water over the radiator where the smoke was coming from, but could not put out the flames. He then ran to get fire extinguisher from a nearby garage, but these also failed to have any effect. Finally he telephoned for a fire engine, but by the time it arrived, the car was totally burnt out.
A driving instructor died in a road accident near Oxford while he was giving a lesson to a learner driver. Mr. Tony Carter of Market Street, Oxford, was the passenger of a metro car when it crashed into a lorry on the A361. Mr. Carter, 34, a married man with 2 children, was the 69th person to die on Oxfordshire's roads so far this year. The accident happened at 2:30 p.m. last Thursday, when Mr. Carter's Metro, driven by 17-year-old Wayne Easton, of Iffley Road, Oxford, was turning right at a crossroads. The car hit a Mercedes lorry which was travelling in the opposite direction. Mr. Easton was taken to the John Radcliffe Hospital, Oxford, where his condition was described as satisfactory. He has since gone home. The lorry driver, Mr. Ron Tubbs, of Queen Street, Abingdon, was unhurt. "There was no signal," said Mr. Tubbs. "I didn't know he was going to turn right, so I just kept going straight ahead as normal." Police would like to talk to the driver of the red and white coach which was traveling behind the lorry at the time of the accident.
If you were to stop people in the street and ask them to name a ship that had been sunk, it is likely that nearly all of them would say the Titanic. For the sinking of the Titanic was, if not the most tragic, certainly the most famous sea disaster in the history of ocean travel. The Titanic was built as a luxury liner, intended to be the fastest in the world, and a great deal of publicity had surrounded it. The last point probably explains why so many important people from all walks of life were on the boat when it went down. The Titanic was on its maiden voyage to America in 1912 when it struck an iceberg and sank. Of its 2,300 passengers, more than two-thirds were drowned. Because the Titanic was thought to be virtually unsinkable, no one was prepared for the tragedy. There was total panic as very few of the passengers had bothered to learn the necessary drill in the event of trouble. There was severe shortage of lifeboats and those that were launched were still half empty. The one point of calm was to be found in the ballroom where the band carried on playing right to the very end. What makes the sinking of the Titanic even more tragic is the fact that warnings of icebergs had been sent, yet the liner was still continuing at full speed. In addition, one ship was only 10 miles away but did not receive the distress signal. One good thing did, however, result from the disaster. The whole question of safety at sea was looked into, resulting in much better safety measures, including stricter lifeboat regulations and the establishment of an iceberg patrol.
What is life like for today's students? As the university and college terms began, I talked to a few students about their lives. Sarah James is a second-year biology student. Money is a big problem, said Sarah. I can eat quite cheaply at the university, but I spend quite a lot on transport. I also spend quite a lot on clothes, as I like to wear things that are in fashion. Colin Peters, who is studying engineering, disagrees. I don't spend anything on clothes, he said, unless you count climbing boots. I'm very keen on climbing, and you do need special equipment, some of which is very expensive. Luckily, my parents gave me money for my birthday in November. Not much of my money goes on transport because I have a bicycle. Diana Bell is a first-year fashion student. I make all my own clothes. This should save me money, but in fact, the materials are very expensive. I don't know how I would manage if I didn't sell some of the dresses and hats I make to the other students. Everything is expensive, she said. That includes the rent, food, transport, and heating for the flat in winter. Jack is a science student in his final year. What do I spend my money on? Well, not on clothes, and not a lot on going out in the evening. My rent is expensive, and I suppose I spend quite a lot on books.
According to the best evidence gathered by space probes and astronomers, Mars is an inhospitable planet, more similar to Earth's moon than to Earth itself. It is frozen solid, blanketed by the mere wisp of an atmosphere, a dry stark, seemingly lifeless world. However, certain scientists believe that these conditions could be changed. They have begun to seriously investigate the possibility of transforming Mars into a Earth-like planet, enriching the atmosphere with oxygen, obtaining water from the polar ice caps, seeding the planet with plant and animal life from Earth, and eventually establishing permanent human colonies. It was once thought to be so far in the future as to be irrelevant, said Christopher McKay, a research scientist at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. But now it is starting to look practical. We could do it in 4 of 5 decades. The idea of terraforming Mars, as enthusiasts call it, has its roots in science fiction. But as researchers develop a more profound understanding of how Earth's ecology supports life, they have begun to see that it may be possible to create a similar condition on Mars.